Right now, at the bottom of Virginia's rivers, the largest peacetime earth-moving operation in American history is underway. Millions of tons of sand are being sucked up, processed, and strategically placed. And no, this isn't about beach resorts or concrete. This is about survival. Specifically, the survival of one of America's most important military installations, the place where a third of the Navy parks its ships, and a chunk of coastline that's sinking faster than the Titanic. Welcome to Norfolk, Virginia, home to the largest naval base on the planet, and it's drowning. Let's start with a number that should make you uncomfortable. Norfolk Naval Station sits on land that's subsiding, that's geologists speak for sinking, at a rate of about 4.5 millimeters per year. Doesn't sound like much, right? That's less than a quarter of an inch. But here's the thing. The ocean isn't waiting around. Sea levels in Norfolk are rising at roughly 5 millimeters per year. Add those together, and you get about 9 millimeters of relative sea level rise annually. That's almost half an inch every year. In a decade, 4.5 inches. By 2050, over a foot. By 2100, we're talking 3 to 4 feet of water where there used to be dry land. Now you might be thinking, just move the base. Relocate the submarines, find higher ground. Simple, right? Wrong. Norfolk Naval Station isn't just a base. It's a beast. 75 warships call this place home. That's more than most countries have in their entire navy. 11 piers, 14 wharves, and enough infrastructure to make a small city jealous. The place employs over 75,000 people. The economic impact, around $23 billion annually. You don't just move that, you can't. So what do you do when your most strategically vital naval installation is slowly being swallowed by the sea? You fight back. With sand. Lots and lots of sand. But not just any sand. That's where the James River comes in. And the York River. And the Rappahannock. Virginia's rivers have been sitting on a goldmine of sediment for millennia. And now the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has decided it's time to withdraw from that account, heavily. Here's how it works. Imagine a floating vacuum cleaner the size of a football field. That's basically what a dredge is. These massive vessels cruise along the riverbed with enormous suction pipes, some of them 3 feet in diameter, pulling up sand, silt, and sediment like the world's most powerful shop vac. The material gets mixed with water, creating a slurry that's about 15 to 20% solid material. The rest is just liquid transport. Then it's pumped through miles of pipeline, sometimes floating, sometimes submerged, until it reaches its destination. And where is that destination? The shoreline, the beaches, the wetlands, anywhere that needs reinforcement against the Atlantic's relentless appetite. Let's talk numbers. The Corps has been pulling approximately 2 to 3 million cubic yards of sand annually from Virginia's rivers. That's enough to fill the Empire State Building twice every single year. And this isn't a short-term project. This is a multi-decade commitment. Some estimates suggest that by 2040, over 50 million cubic yards will have been dredged and relocated. That's a mountain of sand. Literally. But why rivers? Why not just dredge offshore? Good question. Offshore sand is expensive. You're dealing with deeper water, harsher conditions, and logistical nightmares. River sand is accessible, relatively cheap, and conveniently located. Plus, there's a bonus. Dredging rivers isn't just about getting sand, it's also about navigation. The James River Channel needs to stay deep enough for cargo ships to reach the port of Richmond. The York River supports commercial traffic. By dredging these waterways, the Corps kills 2 birds with 1 stone, deeper channels for ships, and millions of tons of sand for coastal protection. The military loves it. Now you might be wondering what happens to the riverbed when you vacuum up millions of tons of material. Does the river just collapse? Do fish start filing complaints? The answer is complicated. Rivers naturally replenish sediment over time. Erosion upstream, seasonal floods, All of that brings new material downstream. The Corps claims their dredging is sustainable, that they're only taking what the river can afford to lose. But not everyone agrees. Environmental groups have raised concerns. Removing that much sediment can alter ecosystems. Fish spawning grounds can be disrupted. Water quality can change. Turbidity, that's how cloudy the water is, increases during dredging, which can stress aquatic life. And then there's the question of what's in that sand. Rivers carry more than just sediment. They carry history. Industrial pollutants, heavy metals, all of it settles into the riverbed over decades. When you dredge, you're potentially stirring up contaminants that have been safely buried for years. The Corps runs tests. They claim the sand is clean, is safe for coastal use. But critics point out that testing isn't perfect, and once that material is spread across miles of shoreline, there's no taking it back. Let's shift gears and talk about what happens once that sand reaches the coast. Because dumping millions of tons of sediment isn't as simple as just opening a valve and letting it flow. This is engineering on a massive scale. Sounds gentle, almost nurturing, but the reality is industrial. The slurry gets pumped onto the beach, where it settles. Heavy machinery, bulldozers, graders, they shape and sculpt the new sand into place, creating artificial dunes, widening beaches, and reinforcing eroded areas. The goal is to build a buffer, a sacrificial layer between the ocean and critical infrastructure. Here's the dirty secret about beach nourishment. It's temporary. Storms erode it. Tides wash it away. Currents drag it back out to sea. Studies show that nourished beaches lose a significant percentage of their added sand within the first 5 years. Some experts estimate that 30 to 50% of the material disappears relatively quickly, which means you have to do it again, and again, and again. It's expensive. A single nourishment project can cost tens of millions of dollars. Norfolk and the surrounding Hampton Roads region have spent over $200 million on coastal protection efforts in the past 2 decades. And that number is only going up. Some projections suggest that by 2050, the region will need to invest over $1 billion just to keep pace with rising seas. So why do it? Why not just abandon the coast and move inland? Because Norfolk isn't just about the Navy. It's about America's entire Atlantic defense posture. Remember those 75 ships? They're not decorative. They're operational. Aircraft carriers, amphibious assault ships, submarines, destroyers. These vessels project power across the globe. Losing Norfolk would be a strategic catastrophe. But it's not just military. The Port of Virginia is one of the busiest on the East Coast. It handles over 3 million shipping containers annually. Imports, exports, supply chains. All of it flows through here. The economic ripple effect of losing this port would hit the entire country. And then there are the people. Over 1.8 million people live in the Hampton Roads region. That's more than the entire state of Rhode Island. You can't just evacuate a population that size. There's nowhere for them to go. So the U.S. government is locked into a fight it can't afford to lose. Which brings us to the really shocking part. The part that should make you sit up and pay attention. Because this isn't just about Norfolk. This is a preview of America's future. Sea level rise isn't a Norfolk problem. It's a national crisis waiting to happen. Miami, New Orleans, Charleston, Savannah, Boston, all of them are facing similar threats. And all of them are going to need sand. Millions of tons of it. Which raises an uncomfortable question. Where is all that sand going to come from? Global sand consumption is already at crisis levels. We use about 50 billion tons of sand and gravel every year. That's second only to water as the most consumed natural resource on the planet. Construction, infrastructure, glass manufacturing, it all requires sand, and not just any sand. Desert sand doesn't work for most applications. The grains are too smooth, too rounded. You need coarse, angular sand, river sand, beach sand, the kind that takes thousands of years to form. We're running out. Countries are already fighting over it. India has a thriving black market for sand, with organized crime running illegal dredging operations. Massive land reclamation projects have depleted regional sand supplies, forcing them to import from neighboring countries, some of which have banned exports because their own supplies are dwindling. And now the United States is joining the party, sucking up millions of tons from its rivers, using it to hold back the ocean, watching it wash away, and then starting all over again. It's a cycle that can't be sustained indefinitely. At some point, the math stops working. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Because the U.S. isn't just dredging for defense, there's innovation happening here. Engineers are experimenting with something called living shorelines. Instead of just dumping sand and hoping for the best, they're combining it with natural infrastructure, submerged vegetation. These ecosystems act as natural wave breaks, reducing erosion and stabilizing sediment. Early results are promising. Living shorelines seem to last longer than traditional beach nourishment. They're more resilient, and they provide ecological benefits: habitat for marine life, improved water quality, carbon sequestration. The Corps is also exploring artificial reefs, sunken structures made from recycled materials placed offshore to dissipate wave energy before it reaches the beach. Think of it as speed bumps for the ocean. Combined with sand nourishment, these reefs could extend the lifespan of coastal protection efforts. And then there's the really wild stuff: geoengineering solutions. Some scientists are proposing massive offshore barriers, floating breakwaters that could protect entire coastlines. Others are suggesting we redirect sediment naturally, using strategic dredging to guide river flows, encouraging natural deposition in vulnerable areas. These ideas sound like science fiction. The reality is, Norfolk is a test case, a laboratory for coastal resilience. What works here could be replicated elsewhere. What fails here serves as a warning. The world is watching, because Virginia's problem is everyone's problem. Rising seas don't care about borders. Let's talk about the timeline, because this isn't a problem decades away. It's happening right now. In 2019, Norfolk experienced its highest number of flood days on record. Not from hurricanes, not from major storms, just regular high tides. They call them nuisance floods. Water bubbling up through storm drains, streets turning into rivers, cars stalling out in intersections. It's become routine. And it's getting worse. By 2030, experts predict that Norfolk could experience flooding 280 days per year. That's more than 3 out of every 4 days. It's not flooding anymore. It's just the new normal. Businesses can't operate. Roads become unusable. Infrastructure starts to fail. The base becomes compromised. The Department of Defense knows this. They've run the numbers. They've done the studies, which is why they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on adaptation. Raising piers, reinforcing seawalls, elevating critical infrastructure, and yes, dredging rivers for sand. Because the alternative is unthinkable. But adaptation has limits. At some point, you can't elevate any higher. You can't pump enough sand. You can't build walls tall enough. And then what? The military has contingency plans, classified ones, for relocating operations if Norfolk becomes untenable. But nobody wants to talk about that. Because admitting you might lose Norfolk is admitting you've lost the fight against the ocean. Here's the part that should really shock you. The sand being dredged from Virginia's rivers is buying time. Maybe a decade, maybe 2, but it's not a permanent solution. The ocean is patient. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't compromise. It just rises, millimeter by millimeter, inch by inch, foot by foot. And America is digging up its riverbeds, moving mountains of sediment, spending billions of dollars, all to delay the inevitable, because right now, we don't have a better option. So when you hear that the U.S. is dredging millions of tons of sand from Virginia's rivers, understand what you're really hearing. It's the sound of a superpower trying to hold back the sea, It's the sound of innovation and desperation colliding. It's the sound of the future arriving faster than anyone wanted to admit. The results won't just shock the world, they'll define it. Because if America, with all its resources, all its technology, all its engineering prowess, can't protect its coastline, what chance does anyone else have? The answer is being written right now. In the sediment of Virginia's rivers, in the waves lapping against Norfolk's shores, in the decisions being made about where to put the next load of sand. And the clock is ticking.